While US stocks are flying high, renowned US restaurant companies have reported a decline in sales last quarter. These companies' alleged support of Israel's actions in Gaza has led to boycotts, further negatively affecting their sales, particularly in the Middle East and Asia. They also anticipate the situation will likely continue to affect demand in the current quarter. Coca-Cola achieved a 7% revenue increase to $10.9 billion in 2024, driven by higher prices and a 2% rise in sales volumes despite Middle East tensions and economic challenges in the region. This growth, excluding currency and acquisitions effects, is in line with forecast of 6% revenue growth, bolstered by a 9% improvement in price mix adjustments. McDonald's faced backlash when its Israel-based franchise announced it was giving thousands of free meals to the Israeli military. This action triggered boycott calls from those opposed to Israel's military activities in Gaza. Amidst this controversy, the fast food giant's global sales growth slowed to just under 4% in the fourth quarter, a decline from the previous quarter, 8.8%, and below its yearly average. And meanwhile, the world's largest coffee chain, Starbucks, lowered its annual sales forecast due to a significant decrease in sales in its Middle East stores. Over the past year, the company's shares have fallen by 11%, leading to an $11 billion loss in its market value. The decline follows a lawsuit against its labor union over a social media post expressing support for Palestinians. Let's get more on this now with Vicky Price in London. She's an economist and board member at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Thank you for being with us, Vicky. Right, so can you walk us through what is happening right now? How is the boycott impacting the Middle Eastern regions? And also, are we talking about the Middle East only or other regions as well?
It's very interesting that it's not just the Middle East. Just to get to your second question first, if I may, what you've seen is that it's happening across the world in places where there are strong feelings, where we've seen boycotts happening in the US and a lot of concern about that. We've seen, in fact, some sort of violence against some of the stores of fast food companies that seem to be supportive of Israel. We've also seen it happening in places like Indonesia, for example. So it's certainly not just confined to the Middle East and protests there, if you like, in the sense of boycotting products and not buying them. The consumer can, of course, be very, very significant in that. And it's interesting you mentioned also Starbucks. McDonald's, of course, has been quite significantly affected as well, seeing quite a slow growth rather than what it had expected originally in sales in the Middle East. So it is pretty widespread. Now, the question is, how much of a difference does it make to overall results? Coca-Cola, which had been affected itself from boycotts before, has not really felt that impact significantly at all. In fact, one of the areas where it's done quite badly by comparison to expectations has been the US, for completely different reasons. Prices are going up, and you've just been having a discussion earlier about inflation in the US. Those costs are still there. So there are all sorts of reasons for it. Starbucks has had problems with its workforce, so it has had strikes there as well that have affected sales because of working conditions. So it's difficult to disentangle it, but there is no doubt, even Coca-Cola, when you look at what it says about the future, they are warning that one of the issues ahead are the conflicts, not just in Ukraine and Russia, of course, what's going on there, but also they highlight the Middle East as well. So it is one to still worry, I think, companies, particularly consumer-facing companies ahead.
And I think it's interesting to say that one thing is to talk about the parent company, for instance, Starbucks. But another thing is to talk about the local operations of Starbucks in a certain country, for instance, Iraq. What is being impacted the most, I wonder? The actual company or the local workers, for instance? I mean, is this a double-edged sword of some sort?
It's a very interesting question because, of course, we forget that quite a lot of those companies basically franchise their name, and they if you want to call it that, they rent their name and they rent the operations, but of course make sure that the product is right to local franchisees. So it is them who are affected, and it is the workers in those countries that are affected. So we may be worrying about the overall stock market position of some of those organizations and what's happening in shares in the US, but in reality, the impact is felt very much on the ground. And you're quite right to highlight that, because obviously if there is either violence against particular outlets or those franchisees start losing the custom, then the impact is very local. So what we've seen is that in a number of cases, McDonald's, for example, some 10% of all its overseas outlets happen to be in the Middle East. So all these franchisees there are trying to distance themselves, or certainly we've seen a move already happening to try and say it's nothing to do with us. We're running our operations separately, and try therefore to isolate themselves, if you like, from this backlash.
Right. What can these companies do at this point? Surely there's something that they can communicate better. And will they, do you think?
They have tried to do that. They claim there's a lot of misinformation about their stance. They're doing that, but of course, you and I have discussed this before. There is an issue about social media. Things spread very, very quickly, and the result is, of course, that what people see and read is not necessarily the statements from headquarters somewhere far away, but actually what is communicated to them in terms of what's happening in the war in Gaza, and of course what those various companies have done in terms of supposedly supporting Israelis, or whatever perhaps it is that you see highlighted, if you like, in whatever social media it is that you read. So there is an issue, and of course it's spread to more brands, and what of course those companies are worried about is that there will be an extra push to divest their shares in the future. But overall, the impact so far has not been very significant in
Right.
relation to overall results.